my cell phone here so I can make sure that we are actually going live. Okay. And we should be on any second now. Okay. Good evening, guys. Finally, welcome to the Weekend Water podcast. We have been promising the show to you guys for quite a while now. We are really excited. For the new listeners, my name is Roan Heiberg. With me back in action is my co-host, Grobby Brink. And welcome to all our listeners from South Africa and from, well, I would assume we're going to have some listeners from the US as well. Really and excited. Yes. For the new listeners, my name is Roan Heiberg. With me back. And I am going to, sorry guys, my testing screen went off. And I'm going to hand over to my co-host, Grobby Brink.
Yeah, just good evening to all our listeners and a very big welcome to Mr. Dave Spaulding. Yeah, glad to have you on the show.
Glad to be here.
All right.
Excellent.
Just for the sake of anybody that might not know a little bit about you, Mr. Dave Spaulding was awarded the 2010 Law Officer Trainer of the Year award at the International Law Enforcement Education and Training Association. He has 36 years of law enforcement and federal security experience. Dave was also a founding member of his agency's SWAT team, and he spent 12 years as its training officer. Guys, from my point of view, if I had to sum Mr. Dave Spaulding up for you, no nonsense approach that's based in reality and experience. Dave, big welcome to the show. We're going to start and kick off immediately with give us a little bit of background, where it all started, where you grew up, how it started. It's just a little bit of a background of your credentials and how you came to be where you are right now.
Well, I was born and raised in a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. For anybody that's wondering what happened in Dayton, that's the home of the Wright brothers, where the airplane was initially designed. No, it wasn't flown in Dayton initially. It was flown in Kitty Hawk, in the Carolinas. But it was designed and built and all that. And then there were a number of subsequent flights after that. So aviation's kind of a big deal in and around Dayton. I basically was raised there, middle class, typical American upbringing in the 1950s and 60s. Went away to college on a track and field scholarship, like many scholastic and collegiate athletes, not wanting it to end. I thought I had wanted to be a track and field coach. And that was kind of the direction I headed. My bachelor's degree was in secondary education with a minor in sports physiology. I actually did teach and coach a little bit before I got the law enforcement bug. So I went on the sheriff's office in the county where I live. I was there for 28 years before I retired, and then took a job working for the federal government for about 7 years. And then when I could not work for the government anymore, I couldn't. The things that go on in government service, I came home and told my wife I was going to be a Walmart greeter. I just couldn't do it anymore. She's the one that actually came up with the idea of the training company. She said, look, you've been doing all this firearms training almost all of your adult life. You like it, enjoy it. Why don't you have a training company? Well, I was 55 years old at the time. I didn't have a beard. I didn't have any tattoos. I wasn't a former special operator or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm not making fun. The stuff that was kind of interesting to the student base at the time. And she said, well, you know what? The house is paid off. The cars are paid off. We thought the weddings were paid off, but we still had a son to pay for. We were in a good financial situation. She said, go ahead and give it a try and see what happens. So I thought, okay. So I entered the training arena totally expecting it to fail. And here 10 years later, I'm still at it. I'm not a young man. I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to fade this away in such a way that I can go out on a high note. I don't want to go out like some babbling, crazy old man who's slobbering on himself that can't actually physically do the skills he's trying to teach. So I'm kind of winding it down, and that's kind of where we're at today.
On that point, we've got a question regarding age and keeping your shooting skills up to par in terms of relation to your age, but we'll get to that much later. So you started off as a beat cop, proper normal sheriff's department.
I started off when I first got my first went full time at the sheriff's office. I started out dispatching cars.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was, and when I wasn't too awful good at that, they transferred me to the jail, and I was a jailer for a number of years. So, I mean, I was a fully sworn deputy sheriff, but deputies worked the jail then. We didn't have correction officers. And in reality, that was a good thing for me, I realize now, because it gave me the opportunity to kind of learn my enemy, so to speak, actually living amongst them, transporting them back and forth to correctional institutions. I learned pretty quickly that I should listen carefully to what these guys say, because they were telling me things about how they thought and how they lived and how they functioned when they were out on the street. And it came to be a very worthwhile lesson. And over the years, I've talked to many, many of these folks, in-depth interviews, and they don't think like you do. They may live and exist in the same society, but they are not you. And how you think about certain situations and how you think about how you're going to prepare for this is quite often wrong. And I try to get that across to students, because the worst mistake you can make is apply how you think about this situation and not how they think about the situation, because you probably got it all wrong.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We have a similar here in South Africa. Our dynamic, when it comes to some of the criminal stuff, that we see here and in the US, especially when it comes to things like home invasions, is quite a bit different. And it's often that, exactly like you said, that there's this massive disconnect between what people think what will happen or believe, and then what actually happens in the field. And then they're shocked when something bad happens, and they almost can't believe that this or whatever that occurred.
Well, and the dynamic is always different with all of these things. We know for years now, people have been trying to corral or come up with some kind of a statistical analysis of what happens in gunfights. And you can't. I mean, there's trends, but you can't do that. I mean, the dynamic is so different. I mean, take it, for example, you guys have kind of, really refined the whole concept of the home invasion in South Africa. They're pretty good at it there. And you have that situation, but that situation is different than being like robbed in the shopping mall parking lot, or that of a law enforcement officer trying to take someone into custody. Yes, they are all armed confrontations, but the dynamics of the three of them are totally different, and trying to come up with averages of what happens seldom is successful. So each fight is its own circumstance. And I try to tell people that the secret to winning a gunfight is not having the fastest draw or the quickest reload or being able to shoot bullseye targets at 25 yards. It's the person that truly understands the concept of the fight. They recognize the fight for what it truly is first, and can adapt accordingly by applying the essential skills they need to win, to prevail. And that's a tall order. And most people really can't take this skill with this skill and chunk it together into a flowing act that will allow them to prevail in a conflict. Most people just flat out fail because they have no real concept of what is about to happen to them. They have some fantasy that's based on video games or movies or wherever they get their information. And many people want their fight to be a certain way. They want it to be at long distance because I like shooting bullseyes at 25 yards with my red dot sight. But if all of a sudden they don't get that scenario, they get somebody at 5 yards who's getting ready to try to hit him with a meat cleaver, what they're practicing doesn't apply. And you can't change people's minds. They want their fight to be a certain way. And if what you say gets in the way of their fantasy, they don't want to hear it.
We call it a choreographed idea of what a fight is going to look like. It's a draw, shooting from retention, stepping away, doing certain things. It's theatrics, and it's bullshit most of the time.
Yeah. And all that stuff's great until your fight starts out with a punch to the face, and now you've got a broken nose, and you've got to do what you just described in the middle of that. Mike Tyson once said it quite well, that no plan survives a punch to the face.
No, the first punch, yeah.
Yeah.
But say you made a very, very interesting point, almost kind of inadvertently. When guys think about self-defense scenarios, and tell me if I'm wrong here, they tend to think of it as, and I'm going to say inverted commas, a shootout. They forget it's not a shootout, it's a fight. Mm-hmm. You might not start out with drawing your gun. It might be a scuffle or a wrestle or a grappling match or a boxing match, or there's this perception that my fight will be clean draw, square range, isosceles stance, thumbs forward grip, beautiful sight picture, but they don't realize it's on the ground rolling between two cars, trying to get to your gun while guys trying to stab you in the face.
It may look more like a rugby scrum than it does a John Wick movie.
So, are you a gun guy?
Really? Yeah.
So, Dave, in your time in handling the correctional services there, any scuffles, any?
I was in far more fist type fights in the jail than I ever was on the street.
Oh, really?
On the street, you had batons, or we used to have these really big flashlights, which were great. They were about the size of a tailpipe.
Maglights.
And you hit people in the head with them far more than you used them for a light, because as a lighting device, they were basically useless. But you had those tools. So, the hand-to-hand type confrontations, I had far more of those in the jail than I ever had on the street. As a matter of fact, the one that jumps out in my mind, I fought a guy on an elevator one time. And
wow, that's an enclosed space, yeah.
It was from the fourth floor to the first floor, so it didn't last real long, but it felt like 4 weeks. But it started out as an inmate attack on me, and we were off and running. And I knew prior to that circumstance that the things that we learned in martial arts and hand-to-hand combat classes and stuff like that generally don't stand up to a fight in a phone booth or a fight in an elevator. But it was still quite surprising at how, what's the right word? How vigorous the event was. Because it was all knees and elbows, and it looked like, again, like a rugby scrum. There was nothing stylistic about it. And when the fight ended with the doors open and both of us falling out into the receiving area of the jail, and of course then 400 people swarmed in and picked this guy up and took him God knows where. But yeah, I mean, those were the kind of circumstances. Real quick story. I took a hand-to-hand combat class from a martial arts type guy who wanted to work his way into, the combative, the hand-to-hand combatives. And his little spiel was always, this is the kind of stuff that will work in an elevator. And of course, I had been in a fight in an elevator, and I knew that the stuff he was teaching wasn't going to work at all. And so at one of the breaks, I told him, I said, hey, listen, you keep saying this, and I'm just going to tell you, I was in a pretty serious fight in an elevator, and what you're teaching won't work. Well, his response was to not talk to me for the rest of the class. I kind of put it in his mess kit per se, but that's what happens when you're trying to teach serious topic matter and you've never actually faced the topic. You know what I'm saying? It's I'm not against people teaching pistol craft that have never been in a pistol fight. That's fine. But you probably shouldn't go around quoting things like, well, this is the kind of thing that happens in a gunfight when you really don't know. Just saying.
Absolutely. When you were in uniform, and you think back on that time, do you think what you were taught in the academy and in the classes adequately prepared you for what you were facing at that time, or did you get to a point to realize I need to work on this myself because there's a disconnect?
The academy is an introduction. It's just an introduction. It's, it's something the state of Ohio or whatever state or whatever country gives you. This is the subject you'll be covering. And far more time is given to like social diversity or sexual equality than it is to like hand-to-hand combat, which, by the way, we no longer call hand-to-hand combat. We call it response to resistance. That's fun. But anyway, yeah, that kind of stuff isn't really covered very well. But by the same token, in all fairness, it does give you a foundation to build upon, because let's face it, you would have no knowledge whatsoever. So the academy is worthwhile because it gives you something to work upon. But let's face it, many of those subject matters, training is not a replacement for experience. You have to take the training, you have to take the experience, and you have to kind of chunk them together. And that's where you get a police officer who is fully functional. Unfortunately, experience is long time coming quite often.
Yeah, that was my question. It was based in what extra martial arts and progression did you at that time look into or did have a base in?
Well, I was in the karate club in college, so I spent like 5 years in Taekwondo before a 70-year-old woman with a purse walloped me right to the ground, and I came to realize that, man, that probably was more of a sport than a fighting skill. I never considered myself a martial artist. I kind of dabbled in them per se. But quite frankly, the stuff that I felt was most valuable was the World War II style combatives, the stuff that like Kelly McCann is putting out there. And his 3-day sudden violence class was probably the best hand-to-hand combat class I ever went to. I wished I would have had it back in 1976, 1977. But I had been introduced to it kind of early in my life. I was probably about the 9th grade. And I was confronted in the hallway. This happens to all of us. Confronted in the hallway by the big tough guy who was going to be a wrestler. And you meet me at the basketball game on Saturday night and be there. I'm going to kick your ass. And I don't even know what I had done to offend this guy. But of course you can't back down. And I'm just like, oh, crap. What am I going to do? I'm seeing my life come to an end. I'm only like 15. My father had gotten wind of it. He comes down to the basement and he says, I know this is coming your way. You will never tell your mother we had this discussion. But let me show you some stuff that I learned in the Navy back in like 1944. And he showed me some of that World War II combatives, the swarming and just running at people and trying to poke them in the eyes and hit them in the throat and just, that knees, elbows, just basically just going on the attack. And he probably spent a half an hour with me and said, whatever you do, the guy's a wrestler. Don't go to the ground with him. If you go to the ground with him and he gets his arms wrapped around you, you're done. So don't do that. That was it. Well, the fight.
Did you?
Say what?
Sorry. Did you see a change in that from? So when you went to a SWAT unit, did you see a change in the training and the equipment and stuff, or was it, okay, off you go and good luck?
Shit. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I say that?
Yes, you can curse. Don't worry.
That simple stuff's what always works, man. That simple, effective. It's the stylistic stuff never seems to work. It's the nuts and bolts kind of things that always work. So anyway, I went to the fight. And we get into it. You can see the guy, he's got his ring on his finger and he's rotating it around like he's going to hit me, that junior high type stuff. And so before he ever had a chance to get set up, man, I started to swarm and just went at him. And of course, going at him full force with all you can see is arms, legs, elbows, and knees and all that kind of stuff going on. You can't run backwards.
And he got a hold of
him on the ground. And as it turned out, I got through that situation. But there was a valuable lesson learned. The simple stuff works. It's not the stuff that looks cool. It's the stuff that looks like a scrum. That's the kind of stuff that always worked. And I truly believe that you could take a police cadet and give him that type of simple World War II Fairbairn based combative stuff. And, you know, if you let them go full contact, pat it up, of course, but if you let them go at it and show them the power of the knees and the elbows and all that kind of stuff, you can make a fairly effective fighter if they have the willingness to engage in the first place. See, the willingness is the tough part. But if you can give them the level of confidence that they truly believe that if I get into a fight, this is going to work, you can make an effective combatant. That confidence is everything. But, you know, it only comes through a serious interactive type training program where, you know, people get shot by airsoft or some munitions, or they get punched with a padded situation. But they got to be in a fight. That's the only way you can gain that kind of confidence.
We'll get to the one of our big questions to you is, how do we start if we have, like, I've got a son that's 15, and I basically have a clean slate with him, and we'll get to your opinion on the makeup of what is needed there. But getting back to your career and starting off, how long were you in correctional facilities?
I worked the jail as a new deputy. Basically, you were waiting for a slot to come open on patrol. So I was there about 2 years, 2.5 years. And then I went out on patrol, rotated on out. Again, I hated that portion of it, but I realized now it was worthwhile. And then I went out on patrol on midnights because I was low man in the totem pole.
I know there's guys that will be wondering. At that time, I mean, if I got it was late 70s. Have I got my timeline right now?
I would have hit the streets in about 1979.
Okay, so late 70s, early 80s. For the guys that are wondering, what was kind of, it was the era just before the 9mm and stuff started really becoming more. What was the kind of equipment and loadout that policemen in your area and with what did you have with you? What was the carry gun of choice in that time for a cop? There's guys that's going to wonder. I need to ask the question.
Nothing like the Batman belt they have on now. I don't know how. I had a young female cadet one time with a little tiny waist come up to me, and all the stuff that she was supposed to carry, she says, I guess I'm going to have to turn myself into a fat ass so I can put all this stuff around my waist. I kind of felt for her. I hit the street with a .357 Magnum revolver, 2 dump pouches because we couldn't have speed loaders, a radio, and a ring for a flashlight. The PR-24 we were trained in, it mostly went under the headrest with that little side handle up so you can hang your hat on it. Everybody preferred the flashlight much better, but that was it. That was what we hit the street with. The Velcro on your Velcro belt actually worked because there was enough surface area for the Velcro to make contact. But that was it. It was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The popular revolvers of the time were either the Smith & Wesson Model 19 or the Colt Python. I had a Model 28 Highway Patrolman, 4-inch barrel on an end frame 44. Still have the gun. Still have.
Rowan had the opportunity to buy precisely the same one a year or two ago. He's still crossed about it. Yeah.
It's a beast. I mean, those were the kind of revolvers you could actually buffalo somebody with the barrel, and it wouldn't hurt them any. You know, you didn't want to hurt him. You didn't want to hit him with the trigger guard because the trigger guard would collapse around the trigger, and then you couldn't shoot the gun. But the barrel, you could smack him with the barrel. Can't do that anymore, but you used to be able to.
And then.
Attitude realignment tool.
It did. You know, the funny thing about hitting somebody with a flashlight or something like that, you know, the capillaries are just right below the skin. So when you would hit them, it looked like their head explodes. But it's not serious injury. And the next time they see you, they call you sir.
So. Just for the sake, we've got a lot of material to go through. So obviously, progressed into doing patrols. When did you start looking and generating your interest in SWAT and exploring, let's call it more technical police work?
The SWAT team was formed in 1980. I mean,
wow.
It was very early on, and of course, boy, we were rudimentary. But I tried out for the SWAT team as soon as it was formed because it was an action-oriented. I wanted action stuff. That sounded like it was going to be good action. It wasn't necessarily for the firearms. I liked the firearms at the time, but I just wanted the action. I wanted to do the raids. I wanted to be involved. I wanted the training. And so when that was formed, I tried out and went right into the SWAT team. It was a good year and a half of training before we actually activated it. And if it wasn't for a Vietnam era Green Beret who was also a prosecutor's investigator, we would have been in serious trouble because we had no idea what to do. But he came on and acted as a technical advisor and got us in the right path. Of course, equipment was rudimentary compared to the stuff they got now. I mean, we started out with Ruger Mini 14s, sawed-off Remington 870s, and revolvers. That was our stuff. We realized pretty quickly that the Mini 14s didn't really hold up like we wanted, so we went to HK MP5s and Steyr AUGs.
Oh wow!
Steyr AUGs were the
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how we ended up with that, but that was our perimeter rifle, and the MP5s were our entry guns. We kept the sawed-off 870s because there's very little that's more formidable than a shotgun within its operational parameters.
Yes.
And we went to 1911 pistols.
Sure. It must have been so fun trying to figure it all out and learning it, and I call it almost cowboy times, where it's rough and ready, and you learn quickly by your mistakes.
Our first, they call them flashbangs now, or distraction devices. Our first distraction devices were real stun grenades. Model 425 Thunder Flash grenades made by Accuracy International, which, of course, they had a bad fire and people were killed, and so they weren't in business very long. But it actually would send out a concussion wave. Yeah. The first time we deployed one of those, it blew the windows out. But you know what? People tended to notice, and when you made entry, they were going. So there wasn't a lot of resistance. Nowadays, the things they got now are nothing like that, and they're not allowed to throw them in. They got to drop them inside the door. So political correctness has actually taken its foothold into SWAT, which is quite unfortunate. So, but yeah, it was an interesting time, and we had some pretty interesting call outs. We didn't have the restrictions we have now. So
we had I had a local South African policeman explain to me, we've got those thunder flashes. Our version is called a donderbase, which is thunder in a tube, and they would actually put them next to a window to breach the window because the thunder flash would explode everything in and around it. And no, it's
you put them on a stick.
Quite amazing, but.
Like, what was it? The Bangalore torpedo they used at D-Day, where you could direction. Yeah, I mean, you do all kinds of interesting things like that. But now you kind of can't because of all the use of force restrictions that are now part of law enforcement.
I never knew that. I'd actually have to go read up about that. That's very interesting.
You know what our original breaching devices were? Shotguns with triple-aught buck. You would just make sure that when you shot the hinge or the doorknob, that you were really pointed up or really pointed down, because it just blew the snot right out of it. But it worked open.
I remember you making a comment a while ago on, I think it was one of your porch talks, if I remember correctly, and you said you tend to still prefer a shotgun because and the word you used was, they tend to be real definitive.
They are definitive. I mean, everybody's trying to compare a shotgun to an AR-15. Of course, everybody likes the AR-15 because there's no recoil. It's really cool. You can dress it up like Barbie, right? You can put all the stuff on it. But a shotgun, within its operational parameters, it's a close range weapon. Yeah. Within its operational parameters, if you shoot people, they tend to be dead, especially if you use like an anti-personnel slug. They've got those light those slugs that are so soft lead that you can almost, crush them with your fingertips. And when they hit flesh, they collapse on themselves. And, you shoot somebody in the chest with something that's 72 caliber, goes up to 80 some caliber and is weighed in ounces and not grains, people tend to notice they've been shot. But yes, when they're that authoritative on target, the energy that's transported to the shooter will be more pronounced.
We had it. Some of my friends locally didn't believe me that I said I would employ a slug anywhere up to 100 meters. And I was able to shoot a man-sized target, dead center mass, multiple times with a slug at that distance. It's definitive. That is definitely the word.
Oh, Gunsight pioneered the ghost ring sights on a shotgun, which I still tend to prefer, and would teach their students to shoot pepper poppers out to 100 yards. You could take your average cop, just you're during your in-service training, and have them get hits on a popper out to 50 yards with no problems whatsoever. But a lot of people think, oh, slugs overpenetrate, and you've got to get the right slug. You got to get the slug that's designed for people. And that being the case, they don't overpenetrate like you think they do. They do a pretty good job.
If I just think of what damage it would do to an actual human being, it must be devastating.
Well, they would notice. I mean, I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about one I witnessed. I witnessed a police officer shoot a guy with a slug, and they went down faster than gravity could take them down. Just boom, down they went. And we couldn't do anything until the coroner's investigator got there. But when the coroner's investigator got there and we started looking at it, they peeled back his shirt, and there was this like hole like this right in his sternum. They rolled him over, and there was a hole in his back about the size of a softball. And that slug was laying on the ground right underneath him, and it was expanded to something about this big. Wow. I'm sure he had a case of heartburn for just a millisecond that was pretty impressive, and then he was dead.
Nuclear heartburn, yeah.
Now you're not going to get that from any 5.56 round. I don't care how it tumbles. And I'm not against ARs. I think ARs are great, and I'm glad law enforcement has them. But at close distance, you can't compare the two.
Yeah, I'm in the opinion that if you can handle a shotgun in terms of the recoil and the loading and the mechanical elements of it in a home defense situation, because most things that go bump here go bump at night. Mm-hmm. And with a shotgun, close enough is good enough with a good double-aught buck or something like that. Whereas with a pistol and an AR, it becomes progressively more difficult to hit targets, one at night, and especially if they're moving and you're moving. So yeah.
Well, something I want to propose to your viewers about shotguns. I agree with you. I think shotguns are great, and of course, you can play with the buckshot size and birdshot. You can do all kinds of different things to make yourself feel good. But keep in mind that when it leaves the barrel, it's starting to expand. So you've got a projectile that's constantly changing. The further it gets away from the barrel, if there was ever a gun you needed to aim, it's a shotgun.
Yeah.
You just don't push it out there and clean the alley. That's not what happens with a shotgun. You have to place the rounds on target. But its on target effectiveness is beyond reproach. It's undisputed.
We did a quick live stream a couple of weeks ago about shotguns for home defense here in South Africa, and we said exactly the same thing, where there's this myth that it's point and click, and it's simply not the truth. If you just go through the effort of trying to pattern your shotgun and not listening to bullshit stories, you'll see it firsthand that it needs to be aimed. But what I wanted to ask you was, would you agree, though, that especially a pump action is almost a bit of a specialist's weapon in the sense that it is not as simple as many people make it out to be? It takes a bit of operator training, and otherwise you're going to screw it up badly.
Short stroke in the pump action is a very, very common thing. You have to go back and forth. And if you're really a good pump action shotgunner, you've learned the idea that as the pump action goes back, it goes back forward so you can fire the shot as soon as it's forward. And there's all kinds of stuff out there. Quite frankly, I kind of like the double barrel coach gun. Old-style stuff. A double barrel coach gun that you pop open. Yeah, it's only 2 rounds. Don't miss. I get that. But a coach gun that's got a light on it. I mean, that's a pretty formidable home defense tool, and it's as simple as can be to use. In this day and age, if I was carrying a shotgun for serious social purposes, I would probably use a semi-automatic just because I'm lazy. No, I don't want to pump the action anymore. Why not just press the trigger? So, and they, whether they're gas or recoil operated, that does help eat up some of the recoil. And you can use the jelly type recoil pads. And, if you've got a true correct length of pull, that will help a lot. But yeah, I mean, if I was going to be going into shotgunning right now, it'd be a semi-automatic just because at my age, I'm just too lazy to pump it. But there's nothing wrong with a pump action gun. And again, if you want something really simple, get yourself a coach gun and put a light on it. I mean, it served the guys in the Old West here in the United States quite well for a long time. I mean, that's what they defended stagecoaches with, thus the term coach gun.
Riding shotgun, yeah.
Yeah, riding shotgun. I mean, Wyatt Earp did in Curly Bill Brochures pretty definitively with a double barrel shotgun. So, I mean, the shotgun is a kind of underutilized weapon because it just doesn't have the cool factor of the AR. I'm just going to say it out loud, and I'm an AR guy. Don't misunderstand. I like ARs.
So just for the sake of getting a little bit back into our our program, is that SWAT? How long in SWAT?
About 15 years. 12 years as the training officer.
Wow. So that was pretty much the end of your until the end of your police career, correct?
Yeah, I left SWAT and went right into a training position. And so I'm a full-time trainer. It made it a lot easier not to be in SWAT when I was doing training full-time. What happened to SWAT is I just felt like I got too old. I got to the point where climbing through those windows and up on those roofs just wasn't easy. And, of course, rappelling was all the rage back in those days, right? We would go to the local fire training tower, which was 5 stories tall. And, when I was 25 years old and I'd bail off that and I'd go down, I got to be 40. I started kind of looking over the edge of that thinking, not so much anymore. So it was time to go.
A good friend of mine does training.
Sorry, yeah.
Does training for the Finnish army, and he's a reservist there as well. And his knees are slightly buggered when he came hunting last year. And he says, it's young man jumping with heavy packs from walls and buildings. So it absolutely makes sense.
I mean, there comes a time, you may not want to leave those kind of operations, but there is a time that comes when it's time to turn it over to the younger guys. They've got the fast twitch muscles and all that kind of stuff. And experience is worthwhile, but the experience is useless if you haven't got the musculoskeletal system to apply it.
To handle it. So now, sorry, Rowan. One more question.
No, it's all right.
SWAT. In your time from 1980 to 1995, obviously must have been a dramatic change in terms of tactics, equipment. Do you think from 1995 to now, which is another odd 25 years, is there as big a progression in those days, or has it now sort of leveled out in terms of the actual application of the skills?
Well, a lot of the equipment stuff came from military advancements. My former agency SWAT team now has equipment that we never even dreamed of, armored vehicles and stuff like that, which is just terrific. The short barreled AR-15s, the body armor. I mean, our body armor was like 2 big slabs of Kevlar with a steel plate, the load bearing equipment that is just so much better. The helmets, we wore ball caps and balaclavas. The helmets are so much better. The eyewear, we had tankers goggles. God, those things were awful, but now they've got so much better eyewear. So the equipment and stuff is just better than it's ever been. As far as the tactics that are applied, it's kind of interesting to see how it's kind of gone and come back around. I mean, entry work, CQB got in my generation, we used what was called This is the part of being 65 years old as things jump out of your head. It was called the immediate threat concept. And basically what you did is you read off the guy in front of you. You would go in and whatever he saw first was what he would go after. So you would go to some place he didn't go. Well, then we got into running these routes and all this kind of stuff. And, people, that didn't work out as well as people thought it would, but it was great in a training course. And now I see us kind of coming back around now to close quarter work where they're actually reading off the door frame and working their way in a very fast slicing before they ever enter the room. So we've kind of come back around to simplicity instead of complexity. But that kind of stuff will always evolve, and a lot of it not a lot of it. It will always come out of situations that actually happen. We did this entry, and this guy went this way, this guy went this way. Before the center guy could get in there, these guys got shot. Things like that. Mm-hmm. So we had to come back around again. Entry work needs to be simple and straightforward. It can't be complex, and you have to understand you can only put so many people through a door frame or into a room at a given time. And we should probably try to keep it as simple and straightforward as possible while the equipment and the technology should continue to march on.
Sounds perfect.
So when I was doing, my preparation and my research for tonight, I picked up that you did a stint in a narcotics unit. I
was the commander of that unit.
Oh, really?
Okay. Right. So what I wanted to ask was, now all of a sudden, would I be correct in assuming then now there starts becoming factors like working in civilian clothes, working informants, doing drug deals, that kind of stuff. All of a sudden now the whole dynamic changed from being in uniform, open carry, having a rifle, a big team, whatnot, to being almost, I dare say, the exact opposite, that you are not alone, but alone. And you are dealing with people at shorter distances, from concealment, etc., etc.
Well, I should clarify, years before I went to that multi-jurisdictional narcotics unit, I was in a surveillance unit where we actually surveilled identified high-level criminals, people that were doing a high level and not only did we go plain clothes, we went indigenous. I mean, we actually disguised and all that kind of stuff, and did a lot of surveillance work, following people around and stuff like that. But prior to that, I was just a detective. I worked, property crimes and violent crimes and stuff like that. So I was in plainclothes assignments prior to that narcotics task force. And I will tell you that there's a difference between being plainclothes and being concealed. And if you watch American television, you'll see the detectives are always walking around with their coats off, their guns, and they got their badges and everything on, and they're not really trying to hide the gun per se. But when you're either off duty or you're in true undercover or trying to be low profile, then concealment and levels of concealment become very, very important. But before you asked your question, I wanted you to know that.
Okay, well, you kind of did a fantastic introduction to what I wanted to get now, is that now all of a sudden all the training up to now and all this stuff is kind of very overt
SWAT control.
Yes, so
tactical stuff.
And now all of a sudden it's drawing from concealment, reloading from concealment, draws, etc., etc., etc. But how did you make that transition, and how did you realize, okay, hold on, but the training that I might have had up to now is not really all that relevant to this problem that I'm having now? And how did you overcome that? How did you make that transition?
Well, concealing a pistol or concealed carry or whatever was always something I was greatly interested in. And I would say my years of off-duty carry had a bigger effect on how I viewed that than working undercover. You see, in Ohio, until right before I retired, there was no concealed carry provisions for armed citizens. If you were carrying a gun concealed, you were an off-duty police officer. And if people saw that gun, it created great panic. Had that happen to me, not fun. So concealing a pistol deeply in a way that people will not see it, being able to access it quickly, was of great interest to me. As a matter of fact, what a lot of people don't realize, are you guys familiar with Caliber Press, the street survival seminars in the United States for law enforcement?
No.
Caliber Press back in the 80s and 90s was a traveling training show that was immensely popular. I think they're still in existence, but they don't have the impact they used to do. It was strictly a lecture type format, but they would draw 300 or 400 people to one event. And I actually helped them author the off-duty carry segment of that nationally recognized training program. And it was because I was very, very interested in off-duty carry and the situations that happened off-duty. And I was involved in a couple of off-duty confrontations that were not fun because you didn't have radio backup. You know, you were alone, or you had your family with you, your loved ones. So made the dynamic very, very different. So that's what got me really interested in drawing from concealment and all those kind of things. And I think that people do one of two things. They either take concealment too cavalier. They pull a t-shirt over a big chunk of gun and they haven't got it concealed at all, or they're overly concerned about it and they bury it so deep they can't get it out. There's a compromise there. And I think that it is something that needs to be addressed. And you also need to take into account whatever your particular concealed draw technique you like, you can't focus on that alone. Because, you know, like right now, the whole abdominal carry, they call it appendix carry, but it's really not. It's abdominal to the front. And everybody snatches the shirt and they do this. And that's cycling action. And that's great until this hand is broke. Or it's pushing somebody away, or you're holding a bag of groceries, or you're pushing your wife out. And now they got to draw it with one hand. And they've never done that. So there's a whole lot of dynamics. And, you know, I've once again diverted away from your question, and I apologize. Go forward.
No. You answered my question 100%. Sorry, we just have a glitch here. Robbie, are you back on?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, sorry. Yes. No. You answered my question perfectly. That yeah. There's nothing else that I wanted to ask that, because I think that, you know, especially here in South Africa, we see, but I would assume it's based on a lot of what we see on YouTube, is there's this drive for, a lot of guys are very gear driven, if I can say that, and then we look at it and it's almost I don't know how to say it almost, and then you look at it and they get so caught up in the cool guy factor of what they're doing that they lose the practical real world application of it.
They like the way it looks versus how the way they use it. And that happens.
Exactly.
You know, Ken Hackathorn brought this to my attention, and my son, who is a computer scientist and a gamer, in that, I guess in many of these warfighting type video games, the very first thing that you do is that you dress up your players, you gear them up. And apparently in these games, I've never played them, I don't know. So, but in these games, the gear is very accurate and very technically specific. And, you know, you get to put your guys, and it seems like maybe this has brought an unusually high interest in gear. You know, in my generation, you bought the best gear you could afford, and then you didn't worry too much about it. You practiced with it and got good at it. But now it's constantly changing gear, constantly changing holsters, constantly upgrading guns, when you weren't all that good with the one you had before. You know, maybe you should have gotten good with it. But yeah, that happens a lot. And you know, you'll see students that, you know, they'll go through 2-3 different guns in the same class. Dude, what are you doing? Well, I think I can do this one better. No, you sucked with the last one. You're going to suck with this one too. But you can't convince them otherwise. And they'll start out with a strong side holster, and then they'll do it to an appendix carry holster, and then they'll conceal it with this garment, and then they'll go over and get that garment. All of it is geared towards performing better in the class, when that's not going to happen. Dude, your skills suck. Go practice. Go get good at
Trying
this.
to solve software issues with hardware.
Oh my God. No, you can't fix skills with gear. You lack the skill. You can't fix it with gear. Buy the best gear you can and leave it alone. The muscular confusion that is created by having your gun here and then you're having your gun here or having your gun under here. You can't unfuck that. You've got to pick a place. You've got to pick a gun. You've got to pick and stay there and stay there. The only time you should change your gear is when you are truly convinced that by switching it, it's going to improve the skills that you possess. They're not going to create skills. It's not going to happen. It is biomechanically or physiologically a lie. You cannot create a skill with a gizmo. Can't be done.
You just shattered some dreams now, sir. I
call them gear queer. And I don't mean to disparage any homosexuals that are listening. That is not, I have many gay friends. The gear queer, number one, they rhyme. And number two, it's that guy that's just infatuated with gear. I got to have my new gear. Whether it's a cell phone or a gun or they're infatuated and they got to have the latest thing. I actually had a couple of guys in one of my classes who were just geared up. They had better gear than a Delta Force operator. I'm telling you. and I'm just like, what do you guys do? But I let them take the class and they were fine. When the class was over, one of their wives showed up. And this lady was just not happy. And I was like, I didn't want to stick my nose in where it didn't belong, but I walked up to her and I said, ma'am, is there something I can help you with? And she got tears in her eyes. And she told me, she says, I get my kids school clothes at the Goodwill store because he spends all of our money on this stuff.
Wow.
I was flabbergasted. I walked over to the two gentlemen and I said, is this true? Well, the kids outgrow the clothes. I said, you guys can't come back to another one of my classes. You guys are idiots. If your kids are going without the best clothes you can give them and school supplies, what do you do for them at Christmas? Do you go out to the secondhand store and buy their toys? You are a fucking idiot. And I told them, never come back to my classes again. They said, well, that's no big deal. There's other instructors. I said, not once. I spread your names around, and I did.
Sure.
I sent out the instruction, don't let these guys in your classes. They're equipped to the nines, but their kids are wearing secondhand clothes to school.
I think we are primed well for and this is one of our major questions. And it's basically, if we have a clean slate, how do we start building that foundation for a brand new shooter, and not there's no extra influence, and what do we do to start them off on the right path? How would you go about that?
Okay, blank slate. First thing you want to do is you want to get them over the explosion at the end of their hands. That flinch factor, because it's not normal to have something erupt at the end of your hands. So you need to get them over that. You need to get them understand that recoil isn't going to jump the gun out of their hand and all that kind of stuff, because until they get over that flinch factor, that whole aversion to having this thing, trying to teach grip and trigger and all that kind of stuff is going to be a waste of time. So get them over that. Whether you got to start out with 22s and build yourself up to 38s and 9, whatever it may be, get them over that. And once they realize that the gun's not going to leap out of their hand, it's not going to cause cancer and do all these bad things to them, then you start working on what I call the essentials. In many places they're called fundamentals, but words are important, and I don't think fundamental describes how important these skills are. They're essential. They're absolutely necessary. And then you start out, first of all, with the human contact with the gun, building a good grip. And I don't look at grip, trigger control, and recoil control as separate things. I look at them as one package, because this is where it all goes. You got to get a good grip on it and try to be explicit with it. If you ask somebody, what's the word grip mean to you? They'll say something like, hand on a gun or, wrong. Give them things like create inward pressure, create friction. Try to give them a better understanding of what we're trying to do when their hands wrap around that gun, that every available surface on that pistol is important and they need to fill it up until they have no more hand left. Then you try to get them to understand that trigger control is minimal finger movement. It's not, this kind of thing. They try to move their index finger as little as possible, because the more the finger goes back and forth, the more the rest of the hand wants to engage involved in this activity. Of course, that takes the muzzle over every place. Trigger control is weapon control. If you can't control the trigger, it's going to translate through the rest of the weapon. So you try to get them to be minimal on that situation and try to understand that trigger finger isolation is very difficult to achieve, because you go through your day doing this over and over and over again. And if you're in manufacturing, it may be tens of thousands of times a day. And how many times do you do this? Very seldom.
Yeah, not enough.
So it takes a great amount of concentration. So then you build that, and then you worry about where their feet are at. You want them to have a good stance so they don't tip over. But, you worry about their feet once you get them to understand that they can point that gun someplace, they can depress that trigger and not move the muzzle. Because if you just do something that looks like this, you're missing by inches. And what this little finger does on the grip greatly affects what's going on here at the muzzle end. It's just a whole chain reaction of stuff that has to occur. And, I oftentimes tell people to start out with a .22 rifle, or start out with a rifle before you go to a handgun, because, that forward grip on a rifle can really control a lot of the dumb stuff that's done back here. So there's just a real trail that you got to get into. And the handgun is the most difficult platform to shoot well. And then when we start doing about the combative aspects, then we start talking about shooting it quickly, which makes it a whole lot more difficult. And of course, then a chain reaction of stuff. But the foundational skills, the essentials, that's where you want to start out with. Get the explosion out of the way and make them understand to try to be minimal on that trigger and not maximal with that finger. And that's the beginning. This right here is everything.
So
it's everything.
So would sport shooting, would that
Sure.
kind
You're not
would
sport
that
shooting. Why not?
no that's
If you're a combat shooter, you shouldn't be a sports shooter. Who says?
Great.
I mean, just understand the difference. When you're sports shooting, everything is about how fast you can get through it. And hits aren't as important. And you can expose 50% of your body behind the barricade, which you should not do when you're behind a piece of cover. And understand the difference in the applications and go enjoy yourself. Life's too short.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You talk about the essentials, and something that's very common, especially in South Africa now, and it's almost a rage, and every second arsehole and his buddy is trying to punt this, and it's extremely popular. And me and Grobby have both had some very strong opinions of the stupidity of it, but and I think you will agree. But I'm going to ask you the question anyway. You focus so much on, in your own words, essentials and getting that foundation and basics right. But there's this craze where guys try to pitch up on courses that's extremely high level. Things like CQB, vehicle training, all that kind of really high level operator. How cool am I? It makes nice YouTube videos kind of courses. And more often than that, it's absolute horseshit. It's one day room clearing kind of nonsense. I mean, what's your opinion on that kind of? Yeah, you can imagine what word I want to use.
Anytime you enter conflict, you run the risk of losing. Why would you, unless you had to get to your children, why would you engage in CQB? Why would you want to clear your house? There's a good chance you're going to get killed or seriously injured. You know, that stuff, that cool guy factor is just absolutely ridiculous. Vehicle classes. I used to teach a class I called Vehicle Combatives, which was basically a counter carjack class. It was just using the essentials in and around the vehicle. There was no Baghdad convoy course, you know, screaming and yelling AR-15s, throw me a mag, covering. It wasn't anything like that. It was you by yourself, maybe with your family, and you're fighting around the vehicle. The reason I quit teaching the class was because people would say, well, when are we going to get into buddy tactics? When are we going to use AR-15s? When are we going to throw hand grenades? Never. It's not that kind of class. You know what I'm saying? It was not intended to be that way. It was how to use the vehicle to your advantage, or get out of the vehicle, or shoot through the vehicle if you needed to. Close quarter battle techniques, you know, you probably should stay barricaded in your bedroom. Matter of fact, if you can climb out the window, you should do that. You know, the Central Intelligence Agency has a thing they call the hierarchy of threat management. And it's first avoid, evade, and counter if necessary. Counter only if necessary. Only if you can't get out of it. You should not want to be in a gunfight. You should avoid it at all costs. Giving yourself a one-day CQB class, while maybe fun, if you're not doing that type of stuff on a regular basis, all you're going to get is a false sense of skill. And now you're going to try to use that one-day skill in a real situation, and there's a good chance you may lose. Close quarter battle is something that is continuously practiced and built upon and built upon and built upon by people who are doing it on a regular basis. If you're going to a 1 or 2 day CQB class and you've never done it before and you're not being, it's a fantasy course.
What bothers me so much about this, especially in South Africa, you know, a huge issue that we have in South Africa is what we call farm attacks, where groups of criminals up to as much as 12 guys attack farmers, because a lot of our farmers in South Africa it's rural areas, and it's vicious and ugly, and it's not. I don't even want to call them criminals. It's terrorists. It's violent, and it's just. I don't want to get into the details of it, but you know, there's organizations that
and they're there to kill. It's not like they want to rob you. They're there to kill.
Exactly, and there's organizations that absolutely prey on the fear of these farmers, and they teach these guys, you know, hostage rescue in like 1 or 2 days, and you know, and then you look at the round counts. It's like 150 rounds for a course. I'm like, and what in your life can persuade you that this is a good idea?
Yeah, if you talk to the former military guys in my country, and I'm sure you guys have, you know, top tier operators in South Africa, but if you talk to those guys and they're really serious, they'll tell you that that's like a 6-month course of instruction, and you do it over and over and over again, and it's continually practiced. You're not going to get good at that type of room clearing technique in a 2-day class or even a week-long class. People need to understand that training is just an introduction to skills. You are not going to get enough repetitions of anything in a 2, 3, 5-day class to truly master and anchor it to a level of automaticity. All you're going to do is you're just going to get a little introduction to it, and hopefully a level of understanding that now you can go back on your own and practice it to that level of automaticity, that you can do it without conscious thought. And how many people go back to their shoot house and practice their CQB techniques? How many people have access to that type of training? Now, you know, maybe you'd go back to your own home and get your guns out, clear them out, or get a blue gun or a SIRT pistol and practice clearing your own home. But you're practicing clearing your own home. You're not practicing close quarter battle. You're practicing more of a slow, methodical search where you're trying to maximize the terrain that you're very familiar with. You're not trying to get quickly to a hostage that you're trying to save and actually bypassing unknowns when you go past. Because when you go on a hostage rescue situation, And, hostage rescues are really a quite rare situation. They don't happen very often. I was involved in three, where we actually went in and got people. And when you do that type of situation, it's because with a really high level of confidence, where that hostage is and what the hostage takers are doing. So that when you make entry, you got a pretty good idea where they're going to be at, what they're doing. You're going to catch them by surprise and all that kind of stuff. And if that does not happen, people are going to die. That's the reason I don't teach CQB classes. I'm as qualified as probably any of the guys out there doing it. I mean, there's some of the former spec op guys that are really qualified at it, and I would certainly defer to them at any time. But there's people out there teaching this stuff that I know for a fact have never actually done it. Never. And I'm certainly more qualified than they are, but it's another fantasy training camp. I get to wear my helmet and my chest rig and my AR-15, and though I'm never going to actually use this kit, I get to do it. If you're going off to a gun vacation and you realize that, I got no problem with it. That if you think you're going to go away for 2 days and now you're going to go back and use this, you're wrong. I mean, there's people out there that go off to spy camp and things like that, or go off to SEAL camp, and they know they're just having fun. They're getting to drive a boat and bail out of stuff, and they're just having a great time. It's like a week-long amusement park with guns. I have no problem with that, as long as you realize that it's just fantasy camp. You're not building any skills. You're just having a great time with guns. It's okay, as long as they realize that's the case.
So here's
a question that I've been. Sorry, Frost, go.
Just as we're talking, because I call it airsofters' wet dreams, is when these guys have all these equipments and night vision and lovely helmets, and it's glorious. But now, just to dumb it down a little bit, and you alluded to it earlier on, we shoot Glocks, but it's not necessarily the choice of it, but it's one of the best supported in spares and availability. Whereas some of the other brands are not as well supported in South Africa. You don't have an or how can I say it? You don't have an opinion of people sticking to a brand and forming a close relationship, say with something like a Glock.
If it works for them. I mean, I came to the Glock pistol, late in my career, and that was after the HK pistol, which was after the SIG pistol, which was after the Smith & Wesson pistol, which was after the Smith & Wesson revolver. I probably carried them all at one time or another. I ended up with a Glock because I just like the simplicity of it. I like how easy I can take care of it. I do have to admit that with the earlier Glocks, the first 3 generations, I had to have grip reductions. The 5th gen Glock is not too bad. I've told friends I have at Glock that what they need to come up with is a factory grip where the front strap and the back strap are parallel to each other. Then you would have, to me, the perfect grip. It'd be like a 1911, and then build your back straps up on it for larger-handed people. But the Glock is kind of hard to dispute. It works. It works on a wide array of circumstances and environments. It's proven. I mean, you can't really, you can disparage it if you want, but you can't say it's not reliable. It's about as reliable as anything human designed and engineered can be. And, you can dress it up like a Barbie. You can do all kinds of things. Look at the Gucci Glocks that are out there. I mean, they've got some guns out there now that are pretty, and I got no problem with that. Whatever you want to do. I'm a pretty nuts and bolts guy. My guns look like a truck ran over them. They're pretty straightforward and simple, but my son-in-law likes that stuff, and he likes all that stuff. And, as long as the gun runs and it fits you and you shoot it well, I could care less. But the Glock works, so does the 1911.
And moving on, I think it's sort of apt. Your experience with red dots, especially for new shooters and older shooters alike.
There's a Facebook page out there for alumni of my classes, and you have to be a graduate of a class in order to be on it. But they actually had this debate. and they had, and it got real long posts, and they brought in all this research for red dots, research against red dots, and all that kind of stuff, and going back and forth and arguing and everything like that. And I came in and posted, and I'm going to tell you basically what I posted. You like the red dot? Use it.
Use it.
You don't like the red dot? Don't. Quit wasting your time and your precious life breath trying to convince people who have already made up their mind to change it. I don't care.
So this might.
I teach red dot classes. Quite frankly, I don't see a big difference between teaching somebody with a red dot and a iron sight, because I've never done a hard front focus. I've always done more of a flash sight picture or a sight picture that's kind of blurry. I believe in a high visibility, a very highly brightly colored front sight, and still looking at the threat, because you got to look at the threat to determine whether it needs to be shot.
Oh, wow,
so instead of doing that eye sprint, just take that high visible front sight, put it on the target, depress trigger. Isn't that what you're doing with the red dot?
We've got it a little bit different, right? Like the training material that we use a lot now for our sport shooting, and like I'm training my son on it. It's hyper focus on the detail of the front sight. But
a lot of people have done that.
No, it's something. It's
the eye sprint, because you got to look at the threat and make sure he's a threat. Then you got to come back to the site. To say it doesn't work, not true. You can. It does work. You can do it. You have to be highly trained in it. Whatever works for you, man. I mean, I don't care. I mean, let's face it. The Applegate, Fairbairn, Sykes type point shooting works to a certain distance, and at 5 feet, 10 feet, you're not going to get much of a sight picture. You're just going to bring the gun up, and if there's target around the back of the gun, you've probably got it lined up. So it's not this or that or whatever. It's whatever you like. Personally, myself, I shoot red dots and iron sight guns almost equally.
Oh, really?
And inside, I've got 2 Glock pistols that are set up identically. One's got a red dot on it. One's got high visibility front sight on it. And out to 20 yards, I see no real difference.
Oh, really?
You start getting towards 25 yards, that red dot really shines.
Oh, really? Okay.
That red dot really shines. But the biggest problem with red dots is presentation.
Yeah, finding it. Yeah.
Getting the red dot whether you're coming from a ready position or from a holster, get it where you need to see it. Well, there's biomechanical methods to make sure that happens every time. No, I'm not going to tell you what they are. You can take my class. But it really isn't hard to discover. I see all kinds of remedies on the internet, and I just shake my head and dude, don't do that.
Tactical tomfoolery.
Dipshittery, man. It's
just one. This is probably going to be my biggest loaded question, and I know you didn't want that gotcha moment, but we aim for from my point of view, if I had to explain it to somebody, I would say, would I go for a faster draw or for a better gripped draw? And I'd say there's a balance to it, because you obviously want to get the gun and hold it in as good a grip as possible, in as fast as possible. So there is balance to it. But in terms of the loaded question, what would be a good defensive standard in terms of drawing and presenting a first shot on target?
2 seconds.
2 seconds. Okay.
2 seconds. Yeah. 2 seconds from concealment at varied distances on a reasonable size target. I see so many people doing fast draws on a full size steel silhouette. Well, their hits can be 1.5 feet apart, and they're still ringing the steel. Now, you got to place your rounds on target. And I think shot placement's a good word, because the draw should be the same way. You don't draw the gun real fast and drive it to the target. You place the gun on the target.
Yes.
You place it on the target. If you're not placing the gun on the target, if you're just flinging it out there, how do you expect to get a first accurate hit? It is a biomechanical path that the gun's got to come up. It's got to go out. You got to place it where you need it. Depress the trigger. All these people about, trying to find the front sight or trying to find the dot. Well, if you place the gun where you need it, the sight should be there.
It should be there.
Why would it be any other way? But I think what you're getting at is the draw is a controlled motion. First of all, you've got to get a good shooting grip. You can't accept a shit grip. You just fling the gun out there and try to put your hands together and you may get a first shot, but you're not going to control the recoil. And we all realize in a pistol fight, you may need fast multiple hits. So you got to get a good grip on the target or on the gun. And it's got to be right here so that when you present it to the target, you're ready to shoot. And then you place the gun on the target, which means it's not going to be 110% speed. It's going to be a 90-some% speed where you place it on target. The panic factor is going to be astronomical, which is why you get them people that, they just, and they're laying waste and stuff like that. And they never really get the hit they need. The guy that wins the gunfight's the guy that can hold himself together and he places the gun on the target and he gets the hits he needs. So it's a controlled speed. Yes, you want the draw to be as fast as you can make it, but it's a controlled speed. And you're literally good, solid grip, place the gun on the target so that you can get the hit you need to end the fight quickly.
Yeah, so we want to not necessarily have a set standard, but a lot of our training, we train by ourselves. We don't know if we're progressing or if we're on a good enough standard. And I found, like, especially the fast drill, but where you score in the 0 downs, I've really seen not a big progression for me, but I've seen a nice, let's call it simple standard, just to see if I'm on par. If I'm feeling, if I need to do it with the reload, under 7 seconds, all 0 down shots, it makes a difference. Sorry, that's why.
If you don't push yourself, you'll never get better. Which means you have to miss in training. There is nothing wrong with getting the timer out and seeing how fast you can go. Whether it's a reload or a stoppage clearance or a draw, that's how you push yourself. It makes your practice more fun, more enjoyable. But, I'll always want the person to have a draw stroke that they know how fast they can do it. I mean, if you want to try to get that 1 second draw, I got no problem with that. But, can you do that 1 second draw all the time? I'll have people come up to me all the time and say, I got a 1 second draw. Wow, show me. Well, I got to warm up first.
Nope.
That's not a 1 second draw,
So you nailed it.
You got a 1.5 second draw that you can do on command each and every time. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm really happy with that. And on top of that, can you do it from concealment? Can you do it from concealment while you're moving? You start doing that aggressive lateral movement. You want to talk about a time when you've got to place the gun on the target instead of fling it out there. That would be it. So all of this stuff comes into play.
What we started doing, Grops help here, about a year ago, for our sins, both of us are stuck running our local IDPA club with some help of 1 or 2 other people. And one thing we started bringing in roughly about a year ago is that every match, every time kicks off with your 2x2x2 drill, just to kind of force the guys a little bit into it's part of the match, but not really. But it's the first stage of every match that we run, just to tell the guys, hey, you know what? Here's the standard. See if you can do it or not. And unfortunately, some guys take to it, and some guys see it as a challenge. Other guys just see it as a stage. But I found it sobering for myself because it's a cold shoot every time.
Well, are you guys familiar with Ken Hackathorn?
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the big founding names in what we call combative pistol craft nowadays. I mean, he's certainly one of my mentors. He told me when it came to my 2x2 drill, he said a person that can draw from concealment and do that under 2 seconds, reasonable with reliability, is someone who really has their draw down pat.
Oh, wow.
Because you want to talk about the classic example of placing your gun on the target. That's it. And that's the message behind the 2x2. It's not how fast you can draw. It's how quickly you can draw with efficiency, placing the gun on target. And a lot of people throw the word efficiency around. Efficiency is defined as the least amount of time, effort, and energy expended. And in a time when things look cool on the internet, efficiency's gone out the window a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about a good, efficient draw, it doesn't look all herky-jerky and spastic. It's just, and there it is. It's done.
It's a question that I've been kind of wondering. You know, I've been following, you know, Handgun Combatives and yourself for quite a while. And one thing, and I say again, sir.
My condolences.
and one thing that, you know, I've said to Grobby, you know, my host co-host, is one thing that I've always enjoyed is you find that balance between solid fundamentals, kind of you've walked the hard yards, you've been on the street, you see what works and what doesn't work, all that kind of experience, and you've been through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but so it's kind of almost that old school element, but in the same breath, to use the word that I don't really want to use, you've still stayed relevant with modern times and embraced modern technology, things like red dots, you know, new understanding of biomechanics and how we shoot, and you found that kind of almost that balance into how your approach. But with that, you see so many new fads and crazy ideas and stupid shit that guys are going all over the internet. How do you find that balance and look at this and say, yeah, no, this makes sense, or no, this is just a fad?
I think Bruce Lee, the martial artist, said this better than anybody that I've ever heard. Accept what is useful, discard what is not. I think what a person needs to be is they need to have enough training and experience to truly understand what is useful and what is not. You know, a brand new shooter, they're going to just embrace everything. And over time, you're hopeful they will gain the maturity and the experience and the understanding to realize exactly what you're talking about. Man, that's bullshit. That's just stupid. A lot of folks aren't there yet. So I guess, number one, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. But I'm always looking for nuggets of wisdom. I'm always looking for ways to make it better. You don't see too much of it anymore because, quite frankly, there's only so many ways to shoot a handgun, and they've all been invented. And all of the technological advances into firearms have probably already been met. Until we can get a phaser on stun, you know, I think firearms are where they're at. So we need to embrace what we've got. You need to have the understanding to know what will work for you, what will not, what will help you solve your problem, and what will not. And then stay with it, not get sucked into the ongoing what's on the latest cover of the gun magazine, or what's this big name instructor touting as the best, greatest thing. You need to know what works for you. And I guess I've just been around long enough now, know that I've just seen all the buffoonery and dipshittery and craziness, you know, every new product that promised to be karate in a can or make you a better shooter, or was going to, and they all failed. They all failed. And what it really comes down to in the end is having the state of mind, the wherewithal, the sand, the courage, whatever it may be, to actually engage in the fight. That's what we can't sell you. You got to develop that. And it comes through confidence, which is gained through solid training and experience. And I'm always looking for those things that, how will this help me with my preparation? Because I look at training as not a fun event. I look at it as preparation for the serious, most fear-filled moments of your life. It's preparation for that. And if it doesn't help me prepare for that, then discard it. It's not helping me any. And if it's overly complicated, it's not. I have a thing I call the 3S test that I'll throw out at my students when this very question comes up. The first S is it simple to do? If it's not simple to do, does anybody really think it's going to get easier in the middle of a fight? No. Does it make sense to you? Because even a new shooter has some degree of formal education, has some degree of life experience. You ask them, is what I'm saying to you make sense to you? If it doesn't make sense to you, then maybe it's not something you should incorporate into your skill sets. And if you're not sure about it, go to the instructor. Go to the instructor and ask them, hey, this doesn't make sense to me. Help me with it. And if they can't do that, if they can't tell you why this will benefit you, if they just give you some kind of thing like, well, to do it otherwise is just stupid, or hey, this is how I do it, and this is my class, that stuff doesn't wash.
That was literally my next question, is that how do you identify the guy that's training you is giving you bullshit?
Yeah, if he can't help it make sense to you, because you're getting ready to take a long journey to anchor this skill, so it should be important to you. It should make sense to you. And then last but not least, is it street proven?
Oh,
if it hasn't been used, and I'm not talking about one time, maybe there was some guy somewhere that did a triple backflip to cover and saved his life, but that's probably not something that you should be incorporating to your skill sets, right? But if it's simple, it makes sense to you, and it's street proven. Let me get my fingers in there. If you can cover those 3 S's, then maybe it's something you want to consider. But it's got to have a combative application, not a competitive application or a sporting application. It's got to be directed at the fight. And I throw that stuff out there all the time. I've got really strong feelings about this. I don't think a true teacher is someone that just recycles information they got somewhere else. You see that a lot. Some guy went to a shooting school, thought this was cool, and I'm going to do it in my own classes. Doesn't really understand why. A true teacher of these things should be able to create solutions on their own. They should understand the subject matter well enough that when they look at a particular problem, they should be able to create a solution that will fix that problem, not just see what instructor XYZ over here is doing. Let's steal his shit. You should be able to fix it. And if you're not fixing it, then what is it you're doing? I'm making money. I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't have on my tombstone that, he was an instructor that made a lot of money. I would like people to think back that, hey, Dave Spaulding had some ideas that were worthwhile. And, I didn't agree with everything he did. And that's okay, because if everybody agreed on everything, we'd all be unnecessary, right? Yeah. I didn't agree with everything he did, but you know what? He had some pretty good ideas, and they were useful, and they helped save some people's lives. That would be good. That's what I want.
It's so interesting, there's so many talking heads on the internet, and everybody's got an opinion, and I suppose that's fine. But I usually tell new guys that it's kind of, what's the rage and what's this and what's happening. I said, you know what, man? If you look at some of the big names in the industry, and I suppose one can debate about who the big names are. I usually refer to yourself quite a bit, but if we take, like yourself, like Ken, Vickers, all those guys, for the most part, the big names will agree with each other to a large degree on some fundamental issues. And yes, there might be some disagreements about small things, but everybody knows it's a good idea to carry your gun one up. It's what, for example, we all know Kydex holsters are good. There's certain fundamental things that we all know is pretty solid.
It's logic.
Info. And then and if this guy that you're talking to is this way out of the ballpark on the sidelines, that should be a warning light that something might not be all that it's cracked up to be.
The guy that's trying to be different just to be different because he wants to draw attention to himself and get people in his classes is the guy you should be worried about. He's the scary guy.
We tend to have the comment, if there is doubt, there normally is no doubt. It should be logical and straightforward. Now, it's one of the big questions, and I don't want to sound condescending because I know you're an older gentleman. I've just turned 40. I still try and behave like a 16-year-old, but Rowan and I, we do understand, and he's dealing with some injury issues. I'm getting a bit older onto it. In your experience, getting into your more advanced ages, in terms of a shooter, obviously we can't do the running and gunning.
Call me an old fucker is what he's trying to do. I accept that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's how how would you look at modifying and adapting your training? And this is again for some of our older listeners, just to try and keep at that pace, at that level. What's the role of fitness? How would you go about just almost protecting your skill set going in as an older person?
You got to stay as fit as you can. I mean, at this stage of my life, I exercise. I don't work out anymore. You know, getting injured it takes too long to recover from it. So, you know, I try to stay fit. I try to keep my weight down. I try to exercise. You know, these days I probably jog. I don't run because of the pace that I'm going at. And, you know, there's no heavy weightlifting. It's light weights. It's stretching. It's calisthenics. You know, I'm trying to stay fit. And it's for this simple reason. Think about this for a minute. An active shooter situation occurs. People are everywhere. You're trying to flee. You're trying to keep yourself from being killed. And you run out and you come up against this 6 or 7 foot chain link fence. And you are so out of shape that you can't get over that fence. So you die. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so much for your Gucci Glock. Now you need to climb a fence.
I've got a gun. I don't need to stay in shape. Well, you know what? It's a fist fight, your gun ain't going to help you any. I mean, you need to stay fit. You need to be able to be fit enough to take care of yourself. You know, if you are so heavy you can't lift your own body weight, then you either need to get stronger or lose weight. I mean, it's simple. I do a class I call Kinetic Combat Pistol, and it's all about movement. It's all about how to move, when to move, and, you know, laterally and forward and rearward, and how to pivot and turn and change directions and all that. And at my age, it's getting harder and harder to demonstrate those techniques, but I can still do it. And I'm going to continue. When I can't do it anymore, it's time for me to quit. But you know what? Just because you're older is not an excuse to let yourself go. You should try to stay as fit as you can. Go take a walk. You know, put down the chalupa. Push yourself away from the table. You know, just, you know, try to take better care of yourself. Getting older is not an excuse to just let yourself go. You need to be fit enough to take care of yourself. My dad was 91 years, just shy of 91 when he passed away. The day he died, he got up, mowed his own grass, edge trimmed, went for a bicycle ride, took his girlfriend out for dinner, went home, sat down in front of the TV, and passed away.
Oh, wow.
What a great way to go, right? Yeah. You know,
with your boots on, yeah.
You feel bad? No, I'm celebrating it. He went just the way he wanted. But I mean, he tried to stay as fit as he could. I think that's the way to do it. Take care of yourself. You can't take care of others if you can't take care of yourself. Well, I have a gun. That doesn't mean you're taking care of yourself. That just means that somebody may take it away from you and turn it into a suppository.
It's you nailed it. I remember I used the example once. You know, at one stage here in South Africa, there was a little bit of a rage there where the guys would hit shopping malls, and it still actually happens. They hit the jewelry stores, and it can get really nasty really quickly. I'm close friends with the operations manager for our local shopping mall.
They would swarm a location and bust everything. Okay, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, yeah. So talking anything between 5 to 10 guys, they would hit a jewelry store, 1 or 2 shooters outside the store. They would rob the store and shoot their way out if they need to. And it happens more often than not. And I'm close friends with the local ops manager for our mall, and my co-host knows him as well. And we shoot and train together sometimes. And I know at one stage they actually have a plan for in case this happens. And then local police, we don't have SWAT teams here because we've got a national police force, but they've been through the mall. They've got a plan if something like that happens. And I said to guys, you know what? Never mind the shootout. Or I mean, you don't really want to face 5 guys with AKs with your handgun. That's just a stupid idea if you can prevent it. But you're walking, and you've got your 5-year-old with you, and all of a sudden these oaks start going off. You now need to pick up that 5-year-old and run.
Yes.
That's a sobering thought. Can you pick up your child and run?
You don't stand and fight. That would be stupid. Why would you endanger your child to take a stand? That's dumb. Again, back to the whole thing, avoid, evade, counter. Only counter if necessary. If you can avoid or evade, you don't want to get into a fight. Every time you enter conflict, you run the risk of losing. I mean, in the United States, we have SEALs and Delta operators and recon Marines and some real high-level warriors, and they're killed with regularity by people far less skilled than they are. I mean, let's face it, everybody they face in the global war on terror is less skilled than they are, but they're still killed because in conflict, shit happens. Why would you get involved in that? That is stupid.
And what I wanted to allude to was you're talking about fitness. I mean, I'm very much built for comfort. I know I'm man enough to admit that. But like you said, guys don't think about this. They think about the gun and the knife and the flashlight. But dude, that's like that article that when you vetted us for the show, what I sent you up. You need some base level of fitness. You don't need to be a marathon runner, but you need to be able to at least move yourself. It's pretty. This level of defense, don't be there.
You go to a class, and you're not fit enough to get through that pistol class without having to take breaks, or that knife class without having to go over here and sit down for a minute and catch your breath, or that hand-to-hand. You're probably not fit enough. You should be fit enough that you can get through your training program and then conduct the training program without having to go over here and sit and take a break. I don't care how old you are. I don't care.
No, that's a very good point, Dave.
So we are very much over time, but if you will indulge us for 5 minutes more, I've got 1 or 2 questions that guys brought up. That I just
I'm out of here. I'm just kidding.
Okay, let's just one. These have been answered. There's one specific one which I like from Neil. I'll bring it up. Mr. Spaulding, can you please share with us your favorite pistol drills?
Oh, wow. Okay. They're mostly all drills from my classes. And I have a very set pattern of drills that I do. And they're all on the Handgun Combatives YouTube channel. So if you don't understand what I'm talking about, feel free to go look them up. The first thing I do in every class in my own personal practice sessions is called 3-round fadeback. It's 3 rounds, either from holster or ready. It doesn't matter, either one. On a 3x5 card at 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, and 25 yards. No time limit. It's the 3 best rounds that I can put down there at varied distances, just really working it. Because I'm so slow in this, I can literally mentally talk my way through a good repetition. Do I have good foot placement? Yes, I do. Do I have a good grip on the pistol? Yes, I do. Am I depressing the trigger slowly? Yes, I am. Did the gun return where it started in recoil? Yes, it did. So you see, I can talk my way through that. It's a great warm-up drill. And I will do that. And then the next thing I like to do is a drill called 5 and 5. That's 5 rounds from the holster in 5 seconds at 5 different shooting positions. 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. And you draw at 5 yards, you get 5 rounds in 5 seconds. That's simple. 25 is a little different. But what it does is it kind of helps you work that cadence of fire that's required at varied distance. Let's face it, you can't always shoot the same speed. The distance involved, the geometry of that is going to slow you down or speed you up. So I like doing that. One of my favorite drills is called 15 to the third. That's one of my movement drills. 5 yards or 15 feet back, a 5-yard spread. You got a 3x5 card. On the beep of the timer, you draw, put 5 rounds on that 3x5 card, instantly move laterally to that other position. 5 rounds on that 3x5 card, back again, 5 yards on that 3x5 card, all hits 12 seconds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can't dilly-dally around with it. I like to do that in my classes because, we're shooting at a chest cavity target. People are getting kind of sloppy. And then I'll throw that into them. And all of a sudden, zoop, now we've shrunk down to a 3x5 card. Makes people be a little bit more deliberate. So I like doing that one. And another one's a variation of that, 15 to the third reloaded, where you have 3 magazines with 5 rounds in it. You draw, shoot 5. The gun goes to slide lock. You're reloading while you make that lateral movement. Hopefully by the time you get to that next firing position, you're loaded and ready to go. I like doing that one. Those are the ones that jump out at me. I like Larry Vickers' The Test, which is 10 rounds at 10 yards in 10 seconds on a B8 bullseye. Ken Hackathorn does a version of that where he puts a numerical score on it. I've taken it a step forward because I don't use B8 bullseyes in my classes, so I don't have them with me. I use a 3-inch Post-it note.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to put all 10 rounds at 10 yards in 10 seconds on the 3-inch Post-it note.
Yeah.
You either hit it or you don't. So I like doing that one. It works delivering the gun from a ready position, placing it on the target, working that trigger, controlling the recoil. If you've got a shitty grip, it shows up real fast. So that's one of the drills I like doing, and they're all on the Handgun Combatives YouTube channel. You can find them all there.
Perfect.
Sir, last question.
Darn.
Are we gonna twist your rubber arm for a shooting holiday in South Africa?
Yeah.
Call it a retirement shooting holiday.
I am not going to spend 17 hours on the metallic tube of death with a stopover on some island somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. And no. Nothing against you folks in South Africa. God bless you. I appreciate it. You've got some great trainers over there who you can use, but the idea, I get antsy on a plane in 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
17 hours later, they'd be peeling me off the ceiling. Just no. But
I think we'll save up and come to you, Mohammed and the Mountain.
We've got saying somebody said we can bring you by boat.
By boat. that would be a long time, but it would be a better solution. I turned the Israelis down one time for a class. They actually came to me and did a class.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I think we do. Hopefully, when all the craziness is over and the silliness, not the craziness, the silliness is over. I'm definitely thinking of coming for a nice extended couple of classes by you. Yeah.
Come to the United States. You can actually have guns here. In some locations are kind of hostile territory, but for the most part, my state of Ohio is really good about guns. Really good. About the only laws we have in Ohio that don't mirror the federal law are things related to carry permits. Oh, I live in a very gun-friendly state. I'm going to stay here too.
Yeah, but us, it's a pain. I mean, for my transgressions in my previous life, I sat on the executive committee for what you guys would have like the NRA for. We call it Gun Owners of South Africa. So I've been involved in the gun lobby for a while. I've resigned from the committee end of last year. So I've been in the fight, and I've seen some. And here in South Africa, it's a different animal completely. Here you're talking from new gun owner you're starting from scratch to gun in your hand. You're talking 6 months.
That's at best.
If you get it.
That sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, the right to say what you want when you want to say it, and the right to defend yourself are two things that we as citizens cannot give up, or we become subjects.
And everybody's encroaching on that more and more every day.
Well, just look how the Chinese virus attack has let a lot of these politicians start taking away rights all around the world. Start telling people they got to stay in their home, and they can't have more than 2 people here, and they can't go to a restaurant. That is absolute bullshit. And I'm going to tell you what, people all over the world are not standing for it anymore. Not standing for it. Good for them.
So, thank you so much. I could spend another hour. I'd love to hear more of the real stories, the stupid and the funny stuff that you guys got up to as younger men. But thank you so much. We really enjoyed it, and I think a lot of guys will take a lot of benefit from this show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate no gotcha moments. I do like that. As I told you guys, I don't do these very often anymore. There's just too many knuckleheads behind the microphone, and you don't know who they are. So, you guys were great, and I really enjoyed my time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you very much from us. I know it was an exception that you made for us. Thank you very much appreciated. And if you ever feel like it, you know where to get hold of us. If you do want to get onto the metallic tube of death, and if you ever just feel like a chat, you know where to get hold of us. We'll always have you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you just to stay on for 1 minute while I finish off, and then I'll talk to you offline.
Sure.
Okay, and thanks, guys. Cheers, hey. Good luck. Bye.
Cheers. Good
You guys have a good one. Take care.
Cheers, hey.